Good evening, everybody. This is Omar Serrata with the Tilted Lawyer Podcast, and I wanted to wish everybody out there a very happy Father's Day. I know that many of you are going through very bitter, contentious custody battles. I know that because in my own cases, which has sparked my interest in making this video, there's just a lot going on, especially around Father's Day. And the same could be applied to Mother's Day, throughout the most important holidays, Christmas, Easter, that kind of thing. There's always a lot of tension around this time. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what it's like from the attorney's perspective, what it is that we're trying to do, and what it is that we're not going to do. And most importantly, how to successfully navigate your way through this portion of the struggle. Because ultimately, Father's Day, Mother's Day, those days should be reserved for father or for mother, no matter what you believe to be true of the character of that particular father or mother. There is a father deficit in the world, specifically in the United States. And every opportunity that you have to place a good father, a well-intentioned father, no matter what your relationship with them, with their child, we got to take advantage of those kinds of things. And now here's the danger. Here's the problem with these custody cases. And I've spoken with this. I've spoken about this on many occasions. But here's the scenario. When you're at this stage, you're usually freshly separated from that person. There's a lot of bad blood. It could have been, there was adultery in the relationship. He went out and cheated on you, or she cheated on him. And now you guys hate each other, or whatever it is, whatever your quarrel with that person, it is made fresh. Because now not only that, not only is it the death of what was a relationship that was good enough to produce this beautiful child, but now we're trying to figure out what is the best way forward for that child. And of course, there's going to be differences of opinion. So I can speak to California law, and from what I've gathered is the general consensus for family law statutes across the nation. The aim of the family court is to do what's in the best interest of your child, no matter what. So when I am advocating for my client, what I'm really doing is I'm advocating for their child. I'm not there to bury dad because you want to put him on supervised visits because you don't trust that he has a new girlfriend and you don't know her background. And, you just can't trust the child to be around another female that you haven't properly vetted. And so it's not fair. And you want to, because of that, dad doesn't get to spend time with the child. That's not what we're here to do. Similarly, when dad becomes cognizant of the fact that mom has started dating again and another guy is coming around your child is inevitably going to happen. So long as there is not a safety concern, so long as we know that the child is safe, so long as we're not subjecting them to pedophiles or substance abusers or, so long as the child is not in danger. It's none of our business who our partners move on with after our relationship dies, the death of a dying star. It's none of our business. And as much as you want to prevent it, as much as you want to stop it, you have to get used to the fact of knowing that other adults, male or female, are going to be introduced into the lives of your child. And that is why they say it takes a village to raise a child. If you are getting involved with somebody new, I'd imagine that this new person you're bringing into your life is going to have to get used to the idea of fulfilling the role of a step parent. That means that their inputs, their opinions, their objectives are going to become very relevant in the lives of that child. And you're going to have to find a way to integrate that into not just your family home with your child who is now in a broken home. He's got two sets of parents living in two different households with two different families. That's just the reality of it. And you know what? As tragic as that might sound, it's really just kind of the majority of kids out there in America. That's just how it is. It's the reality of what the child grows up with. And you know what? Children are resilient. They're not going to be scarred for life. They're not going to be ruined for the rest of their life. They're not going to be made to be lesser than because you couldn't make it work with your significant other. They're more resilient than that. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're going to meet lots of people in their lives. One of them is going to be a stepdad or a stepmom, and you're not going to be able to prevent that. And it sickens me when I have these cases where parents have been split up for, say a year or more, or, a significant amount of time. And then one of them decides to introduce or start dating again, or picking up the pieces of what left off. And look, no matter what your opinions moralistically are on that, I've heard the extreme where, well, if you choose to break up a happy home and you're raising a child, well, that's your fault. So you should now not see anybody else until your child is 18 years old and out of the house, because you need to devote all of your parenthood energy to them. Yeah, that's one very extreme view, but it's not very realistic. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to judge that. I'm just saying 99% of the time, that's not going to happen. So let's just deal with the inevitabilities. She's going to run off and she's going to find another guy. Point blank. It's inevitable. She's not going to join the monastery. She's not going to join the nun convention and all of a sudden decide to date Jesus. That's just not the way that it works in most cases, which means that you have to ready yourself for this idea that she is going to introduce somebody new that your child is inevitably going to meet. And it's going to hurt really bad. It's not going to feel good. And that goes both ways. It goes, if it's the other way around, a stepmom is coming involved and she's going to get involved. It's going to hurt really bad when she starts becoming a real variable in the life of your child. There's nothing you can do about it. And so how do we handle it? We got to be adults. And listen, I had a case, a very extreme case, just recently this weekend. And I was fighting very hard with, not fighting with my client, but just trying to convince, listen, I know that all of this stuff is happening. I know these things. I know these things exist. I know that you have these concerns. But it's Father's Day, and you can't just keep the child away from dad forever. And that would go the same if it was the other way around. And the child is going to be affected by what you do next. And it's important that you foster and encourage your child to have a relationship with the other parent. And that's going to start with you letting go a little bit and letting them go for a Father's Day, even though you technically don't have to. Because here's what's going to happen. If you take this hardline stance that, oh, well, let's just say you got a restraining. Let's just say you got a restraining order and it was a genuine restraining order and you needed that restraining order for your protection. Let's say you guys got in an argument, got into a fight, and maybe the cops were called. And because the cops were called, there was an arrest made because certain allegations were made. And it had never happened before. Now you guys are navigating the family court system with the restraining order hanging over the head of the co-parenting relationship. Well, that's just the reality, right? You have the ability to use your child as a weapon in that you're not going to give the person that the restraining order was granted for any visitation time until further order of the court, because we have the ability to litigate it, and you could do that and you could have the upper hand. But if there's a way to salvage that, you will look so much more reasonable to a judge when they have to come down to evaluate who should be the primary custodial parent. For example, in California, there's a presumption in California under the family code that suggests that it's in the best interest of the child to have frequent and continuous visits with both parents. How much frequent and continuous visits? I don't know. So the presumption is maybe even contrary to popular belief, but it's 50-50. That's what we try to do. The reason why 50-50s don't exist is because work schedules, school schedules, practicalities of it all. Sometimes it's geography, sometimes it's other things. But it's difficult to make a 50-50 schedule work. It's difficult on the parents. It's difficult on the kid. Imagine you're growing up and, you guys have this week on, week off schedule. Okay, so 1 week I'm at mom's house, and then the next week I'm at dad's house, and the next week I'm at mom's house. And you know what? It's a lot easier to go to school when I'm at mom's house because I could just walk there. Dad has to get me up earlier, and so now I'm just on his week. I'm losing a half hour of sleep. and I'm having to get transported to school. Now I get that whole week I don't get to spend with my friends who live closer to my mom because she's over there. These are some of the reasons why we consider not doing 50-50 orders, because they're just very difficult. And that's from the kid's perspective. But imagine on the parents, you got this week on, week off thing. It's just difficult to adjust to, which is why the majority of the time you see these alternate weekend schedules with midweek visits and, provisions to increase visitation time from there. We have all of those things in place. The reasons why we put them in place is because we try to encourage and foster a vibrant co-parenting relationship when we can. But in the very beginning, it's really hard. And when you're dealing with restraining orders, like I was dealing with in a case this week, it makes it even harder, because if the child is included in the restraining order for whatever reason, and when they get included in the restraining order, it's oftentimes without any evidence being presented whatsoever. It's literally the story of one individual telling the judge that this happened to me, and the judge, in the protection of everybody, in the best interest of justice, just to make sure we err on the side of caution, and we say we're going to grant this temporarily until we come back to court in a few weeks, and that's what we do. But in the meantime, if that's continued for, if not by any fault of the parties, but because, for example, we don't have a court reporter, we don't have availability in the courtroom to do a 2-day trial, we don't have whatever, then that's going to get kicked out even further. And so regardless of whether or not the person that the restraining order is granted, regardless of whether or not they did what was alleged, they're still going to be penalized because these temporary orders are in place. They can't see their child, and it could extend on for many weeks, many months. So what is the move? I encourage my clients, if it's at all possible, to foster some kind of visitation schedule. Because in the end, what's this about? What was the fight about? What was it really about? Was it over your child? You really believe your child was in danger? Maybe you guys got in an argument. Did you guys throw things at each other? Did you guys get in a shoving match? Were you guys wrestling over a safe because he's going to try to take the safe because it had all the documents in it or whatever? These are some of the real life stories that we come across. But what did it have to do with your child? Was there any direct threats on your child? Was your child in any imminent danger of physical harm? And if the answer is no, then you should consider what is the move moving forward? We could keep the restraining order in place for either one of you, but the child shouldn't be penalized by losing one of their parents by virtue of a restraining order that a judge hasn't even had time to evaluate, that he literally made orders on based on just hearing one side of the story, oftentimes scribbled on a piece of paper on forms that the clerk provides for filing a restraining order in a domestic violence case. And to be honest with you, 70% of the time, it's not domestic violence the way that you would think it is. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of cases that I have tried for domestic violence restraining orders, maybe a quarter or less involved actual instances of physical violence that ended with physical marks, bruises, or that kind of thing. Oftentimes it's, somebody was yelling at somebody and screaming matches, and sometimes people get shoved or whatever, and it was mutual combat type of thing, or, mean text messages. It could be any number of different things. It just has to disturb the peace, but we end up with these orders and, well, the children get affected. So on Father's Day, on Mother's Day, on whatever day, if you are in a position where you have custodial control of your child, just understand, children need their fathers. Children need their mothers. And when either one of those is absent, there is an entire aspect of their personality, an entire half of their DNA that is being underdeveloped or not developed at all, or underutilized because they don't have the benefit of having both parents there present in their lives in some capacity. Some children has nothing to do with them. For some children, their parents just skip out on them voluntarily. But for the vast majority of the cases that I see, both parents are fighting for some level of custody. And it's always the same thing. They just want as much time with their children as they could possibly get. That's what they want. And if a dad is willing to step up, and if a mother is willing to step up and provide that for their child, then you shouldn't stand in the way of it because of bitterness or jealousy, because he didn't match your love language, because he cheated on you or she cheated on you, or because You think that, her parenting style is not as good as yours, or because of religious differences, or whatever it is. Children are born into the universe. Parents provide one perspective, the other parent provides another perspective, and the world fills in the blanks. You can't be stingy with the pile of clay that you're presented with, which is your child, and try to mold it all yourself. Because that's honestly the way that you risk damaging your child even further. They're going through this just as much as you are. You might not think that they're feeling what you're feeling, or they don't notice what's going on, but I can't tell you how many times that I have had to examine children on the stands that are in the middle of this stuff. And they don't want to speak bad about mom or dad. As much as you think, oh, they're in private and they're telling me that dad is this, and that, I guarantee you, when they go to dad's house, it's the other way around. Or maybe it's not, or maybe it is. I don't know. But just leave children out of it. Leave them out of it. If you want to get the upper hand in your case, there's only really truly one way to do that. And it's not on focusing on the deficiencies of the other parents. If you truly want the upper hand in your family law custody case, you must focus on what's in the best interests of your child. And you must focus on the best interests of your child, even though it's unpalatable for you. Not only does that benefit your child, but in the eyes of the judge, it gives them a clearer indication that what you're asking for is more in lines with the family code. And a finding of what you're asking for is going to make more sense because they trust that you are focusing in on what's best for the minor child. And if the other parent is over here bad-mouthing you while you're just talking about the children, and on the other side, it's all you, or them, or whatever, then the judge is going to take your side because that's what the family code calls for. In the vast majority of states, especially in California, where I practice actively. So you have to understand, when you're in this case, you play a crucial role in what's going to happen with the orders in your case by virtue of how you interact with your child, and more importantly, how you interact with the other parent. For example, if they're spouting off paragraphs and text messages of vitriol and hate and profanity-laced text messages and calling you this and that and whatever it is, if you feed into that and respond in kind, then you've lost the upper hand. Where you gain the upper hand is short, hurt responses that don't play into any of the vitriol that they're spewing off, but focus instead on, okay, what was the initial question? When can you see the sun? All right, simple. When are you available? Done. And just leave it at that. Do not engage in the mind games that happens between divorced partners or separated partners or broken couples. Do not play that game. Not in family court. And if you're going to play that game, don't put it in writing in a text message where they're likely to take those text messages and show it straight to the judge and to be further evidence about how you're not letting the other parent see the child or vice versa. So in short, my best piece of advice to you is to focus on the child, focus on their stability, focus on their peace, focus on all of the extracurriculars that you can give them and what's the best orders to give them the most opportunity to participate in the most things possible. Focus on ways to craft orders that give them the best academic prospects going forward possible, that are going to help them maintain their good grades. Focus on ways to make sure that they have a relationship with friends on the outside, that are of like age to them. But by no means do not focus on the deficiencies of the other parents if they're not related to violence, safety, or substance abuse. And if you're going to allege either of those things, you better have evidence lest you be accused of making up those allegations, subjecting you to severe penalties in the form of the judge possibly giving full custody to the other side, because they have to consider who's the parent that's most likely to foster a relationship with the other parent. And if they think that you're over here lodging false allegations because you're just saying things without any substance or backing up with any evidence whatsoever, they can't trust you, and they're just going to give custody to the other parent. Most importantly, out of all of this, just be very mindful and sensitive that your children are going through something very different than you are. They're not experiencing the same hurt and pain, those kinds of things. They're probably experiencing confusion. They're probably experiencing feelings of not wanting to upset the other parent. Do not talk about the case with your children. Do not talk about you just had a hearing or you're going to court or this and that. Keep them out of it as much as you can. Because if we, as attorneys, catch wind that you're talking about the case with the child, that is prime fodder that we're going to bring when it comes time to go in front of the judge to discuss all the reasons why our clients should get what they're asking for over what you're asking for. Simple common sense. Keep your children out of it. Don't talk about the case with them. Don't talk about the hearings with them. If for whatever reason they're going to be forced to testify, fine. But do not, under any circumstance, coach the children. You know why? Because it's very obvious to attorneys and judges who've literally litigated probably hundreds, if not thousands of these cases before we got to yours, to know when a child is testifying on what they were coached to say. And if we find that is what happened, or we think that that's what happened, then severe penalties, meaning you could lose custody of your children. And the other side will gain custody of your children because you have tried to manipulate the testimony. Which is, and if you don't want to be put in that position, then don't let them testify. And there's very seldom a good reason to have the child testify, except in very specific situations that I'm not going to get into in this video. If you ask me about strategy and about how to win your specific case, I mean, it's very particular. You know, I mean, obviously every case is different. But if you ask me what's my best advice that I would give to anybody, that I would give to anybody in the world about when they're dealing with the custody case, it's just to focus on the children. Now, from the attorney's perspective, from my perspective, like I said, I'm not there to win or lose. These are not the cases that we win or lose. This is not, nobody likes to try cases involving children. Ask me how much I want to get involved in the middle of your parenting decisions and co-parenting relationship with your ex. Ask me how much I want to do that. And yet I've chosen it as a profession. I don't want to have to get involved in the middle of it, but this is what I do. And so when I'm placed in that position, yes, I will protect your child against danger, safety issues, substance abuse, domestic violence, physical abuse on the child. I'll protect against all of those things. But what I will not do is try to railroad the other dad because you think that they're of poor character based on how they were with you. That's not what I'm here to do. That's not what the other side is here to do. And matter of fact, I had a case this weekend where my client, had her child essentially kidnapped from her grandmother who was babysitting the child. And then, took the child. We had to get a restraining order and we ended up getting the child back via sheriff escort. Now there's this restraining order involved. Even with all of that, I'm encouraging mom to try to find a way to carve out some visitation time for dad, at least on Father's Day. Ultimately, I did get my client to agree to give this guy a visitation. What does he do? He files a false CPS complaint against her and some other family members, and it just fell apart. All I'm going to say is do whatever you can. Do whatever you can to keep things peaceful. Do not respond out of spite. Do not communicate your misgivings about the relationship. Do not vent to the other side. If there's a restraining order, definitely don't talk to them. Do not call them on the phone. Keep everything in writing. Keep your answers and your responses and your communication short, one sentence or less. If you think that what you're saying is something off kilter, then have it approved by your attorney. And just make sure that what you're saying is not going to hurt you in court. And oftentimes I'll get text messages like that. And I say, yeah, you don't need to send any of that. And then it'll be like, well, what should I say? And then my response will be, say, okay, or say yes, or some one-word response. And that is how we avoid giving the other side ammunition. You don't want to do that. You definitely don't want to do that because of your bad behavior, because you are peeved about something and you want to get it off your chest and you're struggling to find ways to get rid of that energy, that bad energy. Just don't do it. Find a way, find a priest, find an attorney, find somebody else, but don't take it out. Do not put it in writing. Do not put it, just you got to keep the peace as much as you can. That's how you're going to get the best outcome no matter what. Now, when you ask me how to win your case, I don't know. What do you mean by win your case? Do you mean like cut the other parent off altogether? Or are you talking about finding a way, having the judge accept your proposal for what you think is the best parenting plan going forward for the minor child? Those are two different things. And if you're asking me that question, how to make the best parenting plan, well, I got all kinds of advice to you. If you're asking how to destroy the other parent, I'm not the attorney for you. And if there's an attorney out there that would do that for you, they shouldn't be the attorney for you either. You should find somebody else. Those attorneys, more often than not, are the ones that end up losing in court because they're focused on the wrong things. And they tend to be younger, more inexperienced attorneys. The attorneys that last in family law are the ones that understand the dynamics of what a judge has to decide and how they have to decide it when it comes to these custody and visitation cases. We're always going to default towards what's in the best interest of the child. So it's Father's Day. It's technically not Father's Day, but it's within the spirit of such. And I felt inspired to give this bonus talk, to make this bonus video. I felt inspired to make this bonus video in light of Father's Day. And it's been a rough week, man. There's some bad cases out there. There's a lot of people that need a lot of help, that are really hurt, that are really hurting. And as much as they're hurting and as much as I empathize with them, I'm more interested in how their children are feeling. That's what us attorneys think about in light of these cases. And when I go into court, I have them at front of mind. And your misgivings and all that, I'll empathize, but I'm not going to do it to the disservice of your child. And that's what a good family law attorney does. And if you want to win your case, if you want to do what's best for your child, that should be your focus as well. And that's all I have for you guys today. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.